This is the third video in a series promoting the books For the Sake of Civility and Existence Uniformity. Now, I needed to do Existence Uniformity before I could do For the Sake of Civility. Now, a lot of this content was developed on my website, and I took a break from using my website for a few years and used Facebook pages, particularly the one that's called If Matter Were Eternal, to post things that I was working on or writing about. But from the website, I had several diagrams, drawings with integrated text explanations that I had to go back and decide, after working on this for a number of years, which of those were really the best and did the best job. And so those are included in the second section of Existence Uniformity. There's a lot of those illustrations in here, and there's all kinds of stuff about light particles. This is where I started to configure nuclei, and I was setting up the parameters for that at that time. There's diagrams about what happens in a prism with the light. Also, emission and absorption lines. I've got three. There's several diagrams and explanations on that. Yeah, here's one of those. Anyway, there's some discussion of magnets. What I've already explained in video 2. Electricity. A lot more has been done on electricity. It's kind of come together now. Here's the particles, positrons, the 2 beta electrons, neutrino electrons. There's radio particles. There's an infrared particle in here. Here's a early drawing of a nucleon. Size comparisons was established prior to this book, and then it was included in this book. This shows how the source collection compresses the different types of photons. Anyway, it's got a lot of that stuff in there. There's stuff on relativity in here. Stuff about this is probably one of the most important things in the book. It's I don't have this in For the Sake of Civility. This is the particle system. This is the 13 particle system. Now, I don't draw molecules like this anymore, except the way molecules are depicted by the ball and stick method and anything else they're presently using, because they use X-rays to determine the structure and how all of these molecules connect, and the degrees in a 360-degree circle regarding where say the 2 hydrogen atoms in a water molecule locate. They know exactly the degrees at which those 2 hydrogen atoms locate. They know that with just about everything. I accept all of that now. One thing that I had to work through was, since I believed in a naturalistic system, was that I wouldn't accept that electrons would not orbit in a continual straight line in a plane. And so I always showed at first my electrons in my system orbiting in a plane. And the standard model of the atom envisions them not orbiting in a plane, but changing how they orbit. And this is what is supposedly what keeps the nuclei separated when molecules connect. Now what I realize, since I did the visual experiment in 2011 during the summer, and this sheet is included in both books for the sake of civility and existence uniformity. Here's the visual evidence that anyone can observe him or herself for this atom model. Why there are spherical radial shells. I came up with 6 of those that encompass a nucleus. And outside of those, there's up to 4 electron shells. And those electron shells, those are larger composite particles than the small radio units that orbit that form those spherical shells. But after those are filled, they all have a different amount of repel to the surface of the nuclei, and that gives them their distance from the nucleus. But there's 4. When you look at direct sunlight through a cotton fabric that's been laundered, and so it picks up some atoms on the fibers, they lens. I call that lensing in direct sunlight, and you can see the atoms. You can see the gray area that's surrounding the nucleus, which would be the spherical radial shells, and you can see in the larger atoms that you can see when you do that, there are 4 black line shells, those are actually shells that orbit in a planar manner. They don't change the direction that they're traveling. Momentum keeps them in a straight line. Now they can be moved over, but they want, just like any object that we observe, momentum wants it to keep going in a straight line. When the line is curved, as in orbiting, it still wants to go. It doesn't want to veer to the left or right. It has a force that's holding it down, and a force that's making it turn, but it doesn't want to change its orientation over the nucleus. So anyway, when you have direct sunlight coming in, that orients the sunlight itself puts pressure on those electron shells, and so they orient so you can see them, black circles, up to 4. Some had 3, and that was highly influential in how this atom model has been set up. Here's the particle system once again. There's the visual evidence. Anyway, there's quite a bit in this book. The first section of the book is an historical Jesus scenario, and I came out of religious faith into this, studying physics, studying science. There's a lot of content, chapters, etc., that speak to the topic of religious faith and why it's not credible. I know we're taught, many of us are taught since small children that it's good, but it's not actually that good. It's not true. It's based on a lot of fabricated stories that were made, intended to do socialization as well as for political designs. For the sake of civility, the topic of religion and why we should do good to our fellow man instead of something that's harmful, why we should be helpful and kind. The reason we do that instead of being mean and hurtful, religion gives you reasons for that it's for God's will. But when you realize that religious faith isn't credible, and some of us have to find that out the hard way, like I did, then you continue to do that because it's good social behavior, but for the sake of civility is why you do it. Because we wouldn't have a world that we could prosper in and be productive in and enjoy our lives if we were all treating one another abusively, or disrespectfully. So this is the reason for a secularist or atheist would make a very good citizen in the world, because he believes that doing so is for the sake of civility, so that we can have a decent world to live our lives in.